Hello everyone and welcome to Growth Models, where we're going to be looking at stage models in particular as part of our topic 5 of growing small firms. Now, when we conceptualise small business growth, we've looked at two literature sets. We've already looked at size distribution studies, and this particular session we're going to move on now to look at growth studies. So in looking at growth models, we can talk about stage models. These are sometimes called life cycle models, which attempt to view the life cycle of a small business as a series of sequential stages. And this is what we're going to be exploring for the remainder of this session. Okay, so let's talk about stage models. Let's start with some early research, and in particular some research from Greiner, who was writing in 1972. They suggest a model which emphasises 5 stages of business growth. These were creativity, direction, delegation, coordination, and collaboration. And you can see how these are sequential to each other on the graph on the right-hand side of your screen. Now, at each of these stages, the enterprise is growing organically. It's growing and evolving. But as the business moves towards the end of its stage, there is a crisis or a revolution that needs to be resolved. So as you can see from the graph, stage 1 growth is about creativity, and the enterprise moves and evolves throughout the stage. But eventually, there will be a crisis that hits that enterprise. And for this particular stage, it's a crisis of leadership. The entrepreneur needs to resolve this crisis before the enterprise can successfully move on to the second stage of growth, which is direction. Press pause now and take a look at some of the crises that are listed in the graph on the right-hand side of your screen. So, the business develops and transitions between stages by resolving these managerial or operational crises. And Greiner sees the growth process as characterised heavily, alternatively by periods of steady evolution, crisis, and step change, in other words, revolution. And you can see another version here, suggested by Churchill and Lewis in 1983 and Churchill in 2000. Essentially, it's pretty much the same as a stage-type model. They also suggest changing requirements of firms as they grow. In other words, as firms evolve and become more developed, they have a different set of challenges they need to resolve. But these stage models are not without their criticisms. Critiques of stage models tend to relate to the implicit assumption that all firms will grow and develop through the stages. Some firms don't even want to grow. Can you remember me talking about a small ironmonger's right at the beginning of the course? An example of a mom-and-pop business, a successful enterprise that's small and wants to stay small, doesn't want to grow. Even firms that do grow, most small firms do not grow as anticipated in the models. The models also envisage a steady progress of organic growth, which again most firms, or many firms at least, do not realise. And finally, growth does not necessarily involve a series of crises. We can see an application of stage or life cycle models from the research of Hanks et al. In 1993. They gathered data from 126 high-tech firms in Utah, United States. And they completed a cluster analysis. These clusters were based on size, age, growth, management structure, and the extent to which the firms specialised or diversified. They found 4 clusters that were consistent with life cycle, but 2 that were not consistent. So they developed the following model. So for Hanks et al., there were 4 developmental stages. So enterprises typically started up as startups. They then progress through an expansion phase, a mature phase, and a diversification stage. But Hanks et al. Also identified 2 disengagement stages, and you can see these on the right-hand side of your screen. So for many enterprises, after the startup phase, these enterprises eventually disengaged from the growth projection. In other words, they kept their businesses small because that fitted with lifestyle demands of the entrepreneurs. They also identified disengagement between the expansion and the maturity phase. So, for some firms, entrepreneurs proactively capped the growth of their small enterprises and remained at a specific level. So, time now for another question. Do you think that anything is missing here? You think about a small business in practice. Do you think that stage models adequately capture all the variables to explain growth? When you've paused and thought about the question, you can move on to the next section.